Welcome to Discerning Truths with Bill Donahue. If you're new here, Monday and Wednesdays, I teach the Bible. On Fridays, sometimes we go off the rails a little bit, talk about pyramids, aliens. Today is Dogmen, right? Are they credible? What's going on? So, I used to do an introduction in the beginning. I moved it to after the teaching because I was listening to my own streams, and it was taking me 10 minutes to get to the message. So with that, I'm going to jump right into it. And you can congratulate me. This is my first piece of AI art ever. I was looking for a picture of a dog man, and I got some old ones, but I thought none of them were making me happy. So I submitted this into AI, and they produced this dog man. And the question is, so I added it to the stream, and are they just another from a long list of cryptid creatures, Bigfoot, and all these other cryptids that we have, that are rumored to exist, that we don't really can't prove, but we're not sure of, or are there credible sources that report men with dog-like heads from different parts of the world? And that's kind of where we're going to dig today. And might surprise many people, especially in the Western Church, is Saint Christopher in the Eastern Church, especially early art, was often depicted with the dog's head. Why? That's a bizarre thing, right? And why do we find men with dog-like heads in a lot of ancient Christian art, especially the Eastern Church? Okay. And then why do you find men with or gods in the ancient cultures like Egypt? Anubis has a jackal's head, but very canine-looking jackal's head. Why? Where do these ideas come from? How do we get there? And is there any credibility behind them? So, or are they more like this? Okay. Princess Anne is often called having a horse head. Now, I don't see as much, what do you call it, similarities to her as the horse next to her. But there's a lot of people that call her a horse head, and it's a derogatory manner. And I'm going to show you there's other negative things said about the basketball player Patrick Ewing about being the model for Neanderthal man. Are these dog head things exaggerations based on some similarities, right? Did somebody have? Is it like calling Princess Anne a horse head or Patrick Ewing a Neanderthal, right? Or are they actually people with dog's head? And that's what I'm trying to look at today. So. And I kind of expected to just be able to dismiss these claims in a couple hours. Neil brought them up to me, and I thought, well, I'll go through, I'll do the research, and I'll get rid of this and just, lickety split will be gone. The problem is instead of just finding anecdotal stories and less than credible sources. And I give an example. We used to live just outside of Temecula, and over the hill from us was Anza. And Anza had all kinds of people reporting this Goldie, this spaceship that's over there. There's also a lot of drug use in Anza. Okay, it's kind of going together. I'm looking for credible sources. There are these people that I would otherwise consider credible reporting people that had heads that had canine features. And there were. And that kind of redirected the stream from just well, I'll go dismiss this to what's really going on here. Okay? So I'm going to look at some of the evidence, starting with St. Christopher. I keep wanting to call him Christopher Columbus, but it's St. Christopher. I had a St. Christopher medal as a kid, and he didn't have a dog-shaped head in that medal. So, and then you have this legend of Reprobus. Now, Reprobus just means the reject. It may not be a proper name, the legend of the reject, and it got translated as a proper name, just like we do with Satan. Hasatan in Hebrew is the accuser, but a lot of times it got translated as Satan as a proper name. So the legend of the reject, the legend of Reprobus, how did that get connected with St. Christopher? How are those two overlapping? And I'm going to show you where some of the stuff is. And this was my picture from my original title slide, right? This is 7th century art. And it depicts St. Christopher standing like a man, dressed like a soldier, clearly has a dog's head, right? Now, legends, you have these things, legends and writing about saints. They're called hagiographic narratives. And hagiographic is just stories written about saints. A lot of them coming out of the Middle Ages. And that one legend has St. Christopher says used to be named Reprobus. And I told you Reprobus might not actually be a name, right? And he's captured in combat against tribes dwelling in the west of Egypt in what's called Cyrenaica, which is part of Libya today. And according to this legend, he's part of this Maramarkian Berber tribe. The Berbers, they're a North African tribe, it's there. And according to the myth that characterized this tribe, they were of enormous size, and had heads like dogs. Now, this art doesn't show him as a giant, so we even have an inconsistency here in the art. If he's supposed to be a giant with a dog's head, they didn't show that. He's no taller, maybe even shorter than the man next to him. And we're here. So where Markia is, this is North Africa. In the white on the right side, you can see Alexandria in bold letters. That's Alexandria, Egypt. So Libya is next to it, and then you're moving over, and this is where, according to that legend, it is. So if you were looking at a modern map from left to right on the coast, along the coast of Africa, you would find Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and then it's actually just the northern part of Libya and the northern part of Egypt is in this map. But according to this hagiographic narrative, in the majority of tradition would have St. Christopher coming from here in what would be Libya. But that conflicts with other information we have about St. Christopher, right? But then you go, even in the art from Greece, St. Christopher is depicted as a man with a dog-shaped head. Now, it appears to have started in the Eastern Church and probably came back to Greece, right? But what you have is this myth of this reprobos, the reject in the Eastern iconography and just their art, okay? And it shows him with a dog's head crossing water and carrying the baby Jesus on his shoulder. Now, this reprobus, the reject, was allegedly a giant man who wanted to be in the service of the world's strongest king. When he visited the court of the king, who was apparently invincible, from reprobus's perspective, he entered his service. And one day, while the king was listening to a song, he mentioned the devil. Reprobus saw him making the sign of the cross and asked him why he performed that gesture. And the king replied he was afraid of the devil, and that every time he heard him mention, he made the sign of the cross for protection. Okay? So that means there's a stronger king, right? So Reprobus, he decides to look for the devil, who apparently is even more powerful than the king he's serving. And the devil proved easy to find, and Reprobus chose to serve him. But one day, while passing through the street where there was a cross, the devil retraced his steps to avoid Reprobus. And Reprobus was curious why he did so, and the devil was forced to admit that Christ had died on the cross, and that's why the image terrified him. So Reprobus abandoned the devil and went to look for Jesus, because he's even more powerful than the devil, right? And in the story, a hermit advised Reprobus to build a hut near a river that flooded dangerously and used his great strength and stature to assist travelers to cross the other side. And one day he heard a child's voice asking him for help crossing the river, and Reprobus put the child on his shoulder, began to wade through the river with the rising water. But the further he went into the river, the heavier the child became. It was only with great effort that he managed to reach the opposite shore. then the child revealed his true identity as Jesus. The weight that Reprobus, now Christopher, had been carrying on was the weight of the whole world, uh, which was saved by the blood of Jesus. This legend, in addition to inspiring Western iconography, has made Saint Christopher the patron of boatmen, pilgrims, and travelers. And that's when in these churches, like in the East and the Catholic Church, he's a patron saint of travelers, right? But not all the iconography, not all the art is consistent. In many images, Saint Christopher is carrying Jesus as a child across the river, and the fact that the water barely covers his ankles might indicate he's a giant, but the baby doesn't appear extraordinarily small in comparison. If I looked at this picture, I wouldn't conclude right off the bat that St. Christopher was a giant, right? So it's a little baffling why people would add the legend of Reprobus to St. Christopher, depicting him as having a dog-shaped head, right? While other art just depicts him as a normal man. And you just try to figure out where's the source of this. And as you've seen when I did my Christmas thing last week, the other week, when I was talking about, the celebration on December 25th predate some of the Roman celebrations. I'm okay coming up with explanations that don't support my position or don't take it. I just care about the truth, right? Now, the standard explanation of how St. Christopher became depicted as having a dog head and being the origin of these fantastical tales would be that a Byzantine, Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, they're all the same city with different names, right? And when a lot of the translators and stuff worked in Byzantium, and apparently they were translating a Latin text, which had Canius, that St. Christopher was a Canaanite, and they read it as Canius, that St. Christopher was a canine. Okay? And often the simplest explanation is the best explanation. It's the principle known as Occam's razor in problem solving. All things being equal, often the simplest answer is the correct answer. Now, while the mistranslation of similarly spelled Latin words is clearly the simplest explanation of how such a myth of a dog-headed man may have started, there are certainly drawbacks to this explanation. Byzantium was a major center of academia. The vast majority of biblical manuscripts, which we rely on today for knowing what the New Testament says, were copied and translated in Byzantium. To suggest that scribes working there couldn't tell the difference between Canaanite and canine in Latin calls into question their reliability as New Testament scribes. There's a consequence if we just say that these guys did this. But their excellence as New Testament scribes is well attested to. So making it unlikely that this quality of scribe would make such a mistake. That's the weakness of this argument, even though it on the face of it seems like it's absolutely the simplest argument, that they just misdid it, mistranslated it. The fact that most of the art shown them with the dog's head comes out of the East, where that mistranslation would have been copied the most often, supports that idea it's a mistranslation. But then you go up in the Irish imagery, and in the Passion of St. Christopher, it similarly shows him one as a man with dog's heads and a race of heads that ate human flesh, reflecting a belief in what's called the Cenophaly, the idea that a race of dog-headed people inhabited the world. So what is that cult of the Holy Cenophaly? According to some, in the iconography of St. Christopher as Cenophalis, a dog-headed person, would stem from a cult in Hellenistic Egyptian context, that's Greek Egyptian context, with a reference to the worship of the god Anubis. Again, god Anubis has a jackal head, but you could see where that would easily be changed. A more plausible, if complex, explanation could be the following: that Reprobus might have enlisted in the Roman army and converted to Christianity with the name Christopher. Denounced for his religion and brought before a judge, he would have refused to recant and would have been decapitated. Christopher, therefore, would carry Christ in his heart until martyrdom, just like the donkey that carried Christ to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. That is why in the East, Christopher would have been depicted as initially with a donkey's head and then would have evolved into a dog's head, and the pagan iconography thus perfectly, it fits perfectly within the Christian tradition and unrelated to any pagan cults. So that's a little more complicated explanation. Like I said, Occam's razor tells you to take the simplest explanation if you can. But the Irish also were in the Middle Ages. They translated many of the Eastern texts. So that would explain how that got to Ireland. You know, in fact, there's a book called How the Irish Saved Civilization that actually goes over that in the Middle Ages, how the Irish monks were copying a lot of the Eastern texts, and they saved a lot of information that would have been lost during the Dark Ages. The hagiographic literature, it comprised an important genre in the early millennium, first 1,000 years of the church, providing informational history as well as inspirational stories and legends. A hagiographic account of an individual state is often referred to as the Vita, or the Vita or life, right? The genre of lives of the saints first came into being in the Roman Empire as collections of traditional accounts of Christian martyrs called martyrologies. In the 4th century, there were 3 main types and catalogs of lives of the saints. Menianon, which is an annual calendar catalog in Greek, right, of the biographies of the saints, right? Synaxion, it's a shorter version of the lives of the saints arranged by dates, okay? We have books called oh my God, I just drew a blank on Fox's Book of Martyrs, okay? Be something like that. Patriarchion, right? Pater means father, and it's a biography of specific saints chosen in by the catalog compiler. Now, I want you to understand a lot of these stories have mythological legends in them. Supposedly, when St. John, the Apostle John, was buried, the earth among his grave kept lifting and falling like he was breathing inside there. Probably not true. The stories about the Apostle John being boiled in oil and not dying, probably not true. These all come out of this hagiographic literature, right? In Western Europe, the hagiography was one of the more important areas in study during the Middle Ages. The golden legend of Jacob de Voron, I hate French words, Voron, compiled a great deal of medieval hagiographic material with a strong emphasis on miraculous tales. They like to do it. It's like they're telling tall tales to convey truth, right? Sorry. I just had visitors, and I swear every time we get visitors in Hawaii, I'm sick when they leave. But hagiographic literature is unlike other forms of biographies in that it doesn't necessarily attempt to give a full historical account of the life or an individual states. Rather, the purpose of hagiography is soteriological. It aimed at getting you saved. Okay? It wants to inspire you to accept Christ. So they're perfectly willing to tell tall tales, knowing that you're hearing tall tales, if it inspires you. The second purpose of hagiography is to glorify the persons in whom Christ has powerfully worked. Okay? The apostles, the saints, anybody that has had a major change in their life. It's to give them glory, to elevate them. Right? Therefore, one can notice a dearth, a lack of mention of the saint's sins in his life. Sometimes those sins are mentioned, as with Saint Mary of Egypt or the prophet King David, so that their great repentance can be demonstrated. Or other times there's no mention of their sins at all. Therefore, picturing St. Christopher as something less than fully human, as a dogman, can serve the purpose of the person writing a hagiographic narrative by showing the power of Christ, to both save and to also work powerfully in the life of anyone, even a dogman. If all we had as evidence was hagiographic literature, I think we could easily dismiss the Dogmen as a literary invention. Sorry, I wasn't coughing this bad before I went online. I'm hitting the cough button as fast as I can. The Byzantine translation of the Latin term canis and canius doesn't explain away other reports of dog-headed men. So despite being the simplest explanation of the origin of the literary myth, it doesn't have a lot of explanatory power. In John Mandeville's travels, he showed that the Cenophalli, these worshipping an ox, he equated the worship of ox with the reverence of God's natural creation. The description offered a nuanced, if not positive, textual description to interpret the representation of ox worshipping Cenophalli. On the other hand, an idol was not something not found in nature, with a man with an ox head. Sorry. Sorry, I am really choking. The worship of the ox or the bull is also connected to Egypt. We just seen that. North Africa, Egypt, India. And the Egyptian god Anubis. Okay? It's the ancient god of funerary practices, your funerals. Care of the dead. He's often represented as a figure with the head of a jackal. And some of the legends about St. Christopher said he was part of the Berber tribes in North Africa adjacent to Egypt, so Anubis could be the source of those myths as well. But this is all speculation at this point, right? We're just trying to see where we're at. But here you have some Egyptian depictions. Anubis is down at the bottom with the scales. But Egypt had a lot of gods that had different kinds of heads. Birds' heads, dogs' heads, whatever. Trying to figure out what's going on. What's the origin of that? Is that just in their Egyptian mythology? Right? And then remember I told you Mandeville reported the Cenophalli, these race of men with dogs' heads worshipping an ox. This is a cartoon depiction of that. And it's from the Middle Ages, right? The imagery, again, seems to support this idea of an Egyptian root to the myth. But what about people other than Egyptians associating that? And what where we already had the problem that Anubis has a head of a jackal, not a dog. So these are the sources that it took me a minute to trace down. Because when I found them, before I repeat them, I wanted to go make sure they actually existed. Because as you saw when I did the December 25th stuff, sometimes people will claim quotes that you can't actually find, right? Now, Manetho, he's 3rd century BC, and so the 3rd century would be 200 to 299 BC. 4th century AD is 300 to 399 AD. So that's where we're talking about the 4th century. It's always 100 years off. So, um, so he's an Egyptian priest of this god Hephaestus, and from Sebenotos in the delta of Egypt. I love all these old names. Now, and he lived during the Ptolemaic kingdom. Now, the Ptolemies ruled Egypt for a long time. After Ptolemy is one of the generals of Alexander the Great. After Alexander the Great died, his 4 generals divide up his kingdom, and Ptolemy takes over Egypt. Okay, so that's when he's from. And he's best known for this book on the history of Egypt and Greek. And it's the only surviving comprehensive ancient Egyptian history from that period. In that writing, he spoke of Senephaly as living in the land of Punt in Africa. And here's the actual quote. In the land of Punt, which is located in Africa, there's a race of men who have heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are said to be intelligent and be able to speak the language of the Puntites, right? The exact location of the area of Punt is debated by historians, but most scholars think it's around Somalia, in that kind of northeastern Ethiopia, along the Red Sea and the Sudan, that part of northern Africa. So that's the earliest reference that we could find to a credible historian, otherwise considered absolutely credible source, talking about the Senephaly. In the 5th century BC, you got Herodotus. He references dog-headed men. He notes that the ancient Libyans claimed the creatures lived in their lands. Remember, that's where we had the claims that St. Christopher came from. Herodotus is early church father, so I could find him. He's in Herodotus book 4, okay? And then it says, for in the land of these are found both monstrous serpents and lions and elephant and bears and venomous snakes and horned asses, besides the dog-headed men. Just throws it in with other creatures found in Africa. And then he continues on in Histories, book 4. Okay, that should have said Histories on the top. Sorry. It's Herodotus, but it's Histories, book 4. Both of them are. Let me fix that for the PDF. I go look up these sources, and then I don't cite them for you. He continues in book 4. These men, it would seem, are wizards, for it is said of them by the Scythians. Scythians are from the steppes of Russia, up there above the Black Sea, kind of on that side. Okay, said of them by the Scythians and the Hellenes, the Greeks, who settled in Scythian land, that once every year each one of the Neroi becomes a wolf for a few days and returns to his original form. For my part, I do not believe them when they say this. But they say it nevertheless and swear it moreover. So here, Herodotus is choosing to believe the stories of dog-headed men in North Africa, but what would appear to be like the origins of the myths of werewolves coming out of the steppes of Russia, he's going, yeah, that ain't true. Interesting selection of what you believe, what you don't believe. 4th century BC, this is Alexander the Great in his records, right? Said, now we found a grove full of hewn Senephaly who tried to harass us, but they began to flee when we shot our arrows. Now, as we were entering the deserted area, the Indians reported that there was nothing more worth seeing. So Alexander the Great's kind of pushed off out of there after encountering these dog-headed men. Now, there's numerous surviving ancient Greek and Latin sources of Alexander the Great, as well as some Asian text, right? Asian mean Near East, right? The 5 main surviving accounts by Arrian, Plutarch, Diodorus, Sicelus, Quintus, Curtius, Rufus, and Justin. In addition to these five main sources, there is the Met's Epitome, an anonymous late Latin work that narrates Alexander's campaigns from Hyrcania to India. Much of it is also recounted incidentally in other authors, including Strabo, Athenaeus, Pollianus, Aelian, and others. Strabo, who gives us a summary of Callisthenes, is also an important source of Alexander's journey into Siwa. These sources about Alexander are generally considered reliable history. But in that reliable history, you get stories about him encountering dog-headed men. This is problematic if you want to just dismiss this. 3rd century BC, we got Berosus, who's a Babylonian priest and astronomer. He's best known for his work called Babylonica. It's a history of Babylon. And in that, now I couldn't find this actual source, but I found somebody that I trust quoting this source. It says, in the land of Babylonia, there's a race of men whose heroism, the heads of dogs and the bodies of men. I don't even know how to forget pronouncing that word. They are said to be wise and able to predict the future. So, you get dog-headed men that are wise and stuff. Other dog-headed men you're going to come into are described as only being able to bark to talk to each other, and like cannibals. But you're starting to see a lot of ancient sources in and around Egypt, which might support the Anubis explanation for the origins of the myth. But now we are seeing reports of these dogmen from other areas, far from Egypt, like India. Okay? And Megasthenes, a Greek historian and traveler, he died in 290 BC, so sometime before that he wrote this. He reported seeing dog-headed people in India. According to him, they used barking to communicate with one another, and they wore animal skins and lived as hunters. So either very wise men that could predict the future, or the cannibals. Little kind of all over the board here. Here's a piece of art showing them as cannibals chopping up a human to eat. And it just, but this art is all over the place. It's not like a one-offer that you find just in some crazy book by, somebody. These are credible sources that are all depicting this as if it's just normal, right? Now, Mela, he's a Roman geographer who lived in the 1st century AD, so this time of the New Testament. He's best known for his work, De Chronographia, which is a description of the known world in his time. And in that, it says, in the island of Cenefali, which lies off the coast of India, there's a race of men who have the heads of dogs and body of men. They are said to be friendly and to be good friends to the Indians. Well, we got cannibals, and now these guys are friendly. Strabo, this is 64 or 63 BC to about 24 AD, so kind of the overlap in the life of Christ. He's a Greek geographer and historian. He lived in Asia Minor, that's Turkey, during the transitional period of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. And in his book, Geographia 7.3, it says, but this ignorance of Homer's case is not amazing. For those who have lived later than he have been ignorant of many things and have invented marvelous tales. Hesiod, when he speaks of men who are half-dog, or long-headed men, or pygmies, and Alcyone when he speaks of web-footed men, and Aeschylus when he speaks of dog-headed men, or men with eyes in their breasts, or one-eyed men, in as Prometheus is said, and a host of other tales. So Strabo is dismissing this all as just mythology. None of it's true. So, he's giving you his opinion that it's mythology. And other people gave you their opinion that this is true. Now on the left, I got a piece of art here, right? And it may be hard to see. If you're watching on a phone right now, you're not going to see this for sure. But at the center, near the bottom, right, of the art, there's a man with a dog's head, not a dig's head, dog's head. I swear to God, I proofread stuff before I go online. Looking up at the Holy Spirit, and as it descends in the day of Pentecost. And I'm only showing a small sampling of the medieval Christian art that I found depicting people with heads with dogs. And below right, you have Christ is surrounded by 4 men, look like knights with dogs' heads, right? This kind of art is all over the place. Are they just depicting us as dogs' heads because it is talking about how worthless we are as men, like talking about men as worms in relation to God? 5th century A.D., St. Augustine, in The City of God in Christian Doctrine, chapter 8, whether certain monstrous races of men are derived from the stock of Adam and Noah's sons, and I got the translation of Augustine by Philip Schaff, okay? And here's what the quote says. It is also asked whether we are to believe that certain monstrous races of men spoken of in secular history have sprung from Noah's sons, rather I should say from one man from whom they themselves were descended. For it is reported that some have one eye in the middle of their forehead, some feet turned backwards and to the heel, some a double sex, the right breast like a man and the left one like a woman, and that they alternately beget and bring forth, so these dual sex people can have children and make babies. Otherwise, they're said to have a mouth and to breathe only through their nostrils. Others are but a cubit high, that's 18 inches, and therefore are called Greeks pygmies. They say in some places that women conceive in their 5th year and do not live beyond their 8th. Okay, so this says children being pregnant and dying by 8 years old. So too they tell of a race who have 2 feet but only 1 leg, and are of marvelous swiftness, though they do not bend at the knee. They are called scipopods, right? Because of the hot weather, they lie down on their backs in the shade and shade themselves with their feet. So these feet are big enough that they can put them over their head and block out the sun. 2 big feet, 1 leg, and they run really fast. Okay. Others are said to have no head, and their eyes are in their shoulders. Other human and quasi-human races are depicted in the mosaic in the harbor esplanade of Carthage on the faith of histories of rarities. What shall I say of the Cenophalli, whose dog-like head and barking proclaim them beasts rather than men? But we are not bound to believe all we hear of these monstrosities. But whoever is anywhere born of a man, that is rational, a mortal animal, no matter what unusual appearance he presents in color, movement, sound, how particular he is in some power, part, or quality of his nature, no Christian can doubt that he springs from the protoplast. We can distinguish the common human nature from that which is particular and therefore wonderful. So Augustine is taking a position that if these creatures exist, that they are necessarily human. I'm not sure I would agree with him, but that's his argument. So here's some art that describes some of the creatures that Augustine is describing, right? It's that one giant foot and he's shading himself, and the dog-headed man, the dual-sex person, the real short one in the bottom. These are some of these creatures, and he's saying we got all these fantastic tales of these cryptids, if you want to, for lack of a better term. If they exist, they must be descendants from Adam and Eve. And I'm saying, not so fast, right? Now this is a map, okay, and it's called Purus Real, and it's created by cartographers. Cartographers are who make maps in the Ottoman Empire. And I'll enlarge it on the next slide for you, right? But in the northwest section, this is South America here, it shows men with dog's heads. This is, the Ottoman Empire is not like centuries and centuries ago. The Ottoman Empire was broken up in World War One, and we divided it up after it was conquered. So in the blow up of just that northwest section, hopefully you can see, but there's a dog-headed man right in the top left corner here. There's another one. You see the man with the red hat, and then there's a dog-headed man next to him near the cattle, like below the ship there. So this is on the map. Well, why would a cartographer do this if, what's he trying to show us in that depiction in this map? And I'm going to tell you right now, this is my conclusion. I honestly expected to dive down this rabbit trail, just like I did with the Khazarian myth and Tartaria and all that stuff, and dismiss it as nonsense easily, right? Kind of, ancient cultures are full of tales of creatures who are a mixture of human and other animals. Centaurs who had bodies of horses and often the torso and shoulders, arms, and heads of men. Hagiographic literature, stories about the saints, are filled with legends, right? As I said, according to one legend, the ground above the Apostle John's grave kept lifting and falling like he was breathing. My default position is one of skepticism. And when the evidence is insufficient to cause me to conclude that dogmen really existed. And that's the truth, it's insufficient. But like other stories, such as Bigfoot and aliens, there's enough evidence that neither can I categorically say that they don't exist. I remain skeptical, but open. But I want to deal with Augustine's claim in a minute. Let's say we found proof. An intact skeleton or a mummified man with a dog's head, and it was discovered, and we could say absolutely certainly they lived. Is Augustine correct? Must these be descendants of Adam and Eve? And I'm saying not so fast. I'm not sure he's correct. Right? When we have, the only example we have of different species mating, right, is in Genesis 6:1-5, where the sons of God, angels, mated the daughters of men and produced the Nephilim. Right? That's the only documented case that we have that. You can have, we're trying to decide, because, we create taxonomical tables, like, species, genus, family, and all that stuff. When God calls it kinds, each kind reproduces after their own kind. It cannot be species, because we have different species who can mate and reproduce. Lions and tigers, different stuff. Often, the offspring is sterile and can't reproduce themselves, but occasionally they can. So that tells me that God's definition of kind is closer to the genus. But somehow when angels were able to manifest human bodies, they were able to mate with humans. But still, the offspring were different. They were deformed. They were giants. They were Nephilim, right? We are not told anywhere if these angels also could produce other bodies, like animal bodies, and mate with other animals. But we're just speculating. We're speculating on whether dogmen exist. We're speculating on, if that's true, where did they come from? And if these fallen angels, demons if you like, I think demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, but let's just say these fallen angels, if they could mate with other creatures other than man, what would their offspring be? Would it be half man-looking and half beast? Would that explain why we see all this in the ancient cultures? It also helps me, that speculation, because when God ordered Joshua and the Israelites into Canaan, he told them to kill everybody, including their beast, not to let any other animals live. You think genocide, it's one thing. He says kill all the animals as well. Why? Is it possible that they infected the bloodline of the animals as well, and God was cleaning it out? Is that where those stories come from? The ancient Egypt. Was that also going on pre-flood? And I think following the principle of Occam's razor, that all things being equal, the simple answer is likely correct. The simplest answer to the rise of the idea that St. Christopher was a dog man is likely the mistranslation of the Latin words. It's clearly the easiest explanation. And like I said, if you really want to get into medieval history, I bought it because I liked the title, How the Irish Saved Civilization. It was that little, but Thomas Cahill does a good job explaining how the Irish monks were bringing in scrolls and books from the East and Egypt and different places, and they were translating them. And that's how a lot of ancient history survived through the Middle Ages, is because of that. And that's why he's saying they saved civilization. So if you had a mistranslation go into the East, and they started all these myths about St. Christopher, when those books were retranslated back into the languages of the West, that mistranslation could have been copied back over. But that mistranslation does not explain why so many otherwise credible sources, historians, affirm the existence of dogmen. But we have otherwise credible people today who claim to have encountered cryptids. Like I said, a lot of them you can dismiss to drug abuse or whatever, aliens. A lot of them. But some of these stories are by credible people who don't seem to have a reason to lie. And does that make those stories true? Does it make the story of, what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch or Bigfoot or aliens, does it make it true? Not necessarily. What it tells me is those people believe it. Why they believe it, it could be true, or it could be something else explaining why they believe what they say. But do not leave this study with the idea that I'm saying dogmen and other fantastical hybrid creatures depicted in art and ancient stories are real, and that they're the result of interbreeding between fallen angels and animals. I just threw that out as a speculation. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying there's enough evidence from otherwise credible sources to prevent me from dismissing the possibility out of hand. I still find it highly unlikely. I am very skeptical of these stories, but there's enough here, there's enough meat here to make me go, maybe. And if maybe is true, how do I explain maybe? Right? Now, I am completely certain that we, in the modern world, only know a small fraction of the history of the world. Even the Bible, if you use it as your history book, it's centered around the Mediterranean Sea in the near Middle East. It doesn't discuss the history of Asia, most of Europe, Africa, Australia, or the Americas. So it's completely blind to their histories, right? Other than just in general terms. There's a lot of archaeological evidence and remains that defy the normal story of history. What we're taught in church and what we're taught in history class. That doesn't line up with the evidence. So I'm open to whatever path leads to truth. And any possibility that's out there that doesn't directly contradict Scripture. And I want to make sure that I'm clear. A contradiction of Scripture is not the contradiction of someone's interpretation of Scripture. Bishop Ussher used the genealogies that we know have gaps in them in the Bible and counted back and decided the earth was created on October 4th, 4004 BC. His interpretation of Scripture is the earth is 6,000 years old. Does the Bible say the earth is 6,000 years old? No. It kind of infers that. At least man's only been here a short period of time. Doesn't say it. So I'm open to longer ages. I'm just not convinced either way at this point. And that's why I stay skeptical about the existence of Bigfoot, aliens, dogmen. But this was a fun rabbit hole to dive down. And I tell you, there was more substance than I expected. Just like when I did the Is Christmas Pagan? I expected to be able to show that Christians absolutely celebrated Christmas before the Sol Invictus, because that's what I've been taught. I was very disappointed when I went back there and some of these citations that I was being given by Christians, I couldn't validate. And I went, I still think it's possible the Christians celebrated before Sol Invictus. But I was very disappointed that when I went and actually checked the references, they weren't there. You know, someone cites a source. And this is my warning to you all. Even Christians, and this was a big shock to me in my early walk as a Christian, even Christians don't check sources. Christian apologists are maybe some of the worst at this. Drives me crazy. They repeat stuff, right? You can Google the exact day fulfillment of the Daniel 9 prophecy, the 70-week prophecy. Probably find 300 or more sites. They're going to tell you that Sir Robert Anderson proved that Jesus came into Jerusalem 11,880 days after Nehemiah got the edict to rebuild the city and the wall. And they start from midnight and they do this. The Coming Prince, written by Sir Robert Anderson, is from the 1800s. I can tell from his own footnotes that he didn't understand the difference between a Julian date and a Gregorian date. So if I accept all of his other assumptions in that book, his math is wrong by 3 days. I don't think his other assumptions are correct either. God fulfilled Daniel 9 exactly as God meant it to be fulfilled. But you have apologist after apologist, Christian after Christian, that have repeated that nonsense for now about 150 years. That it was exactly fulfilled. And they cite Anderson as their source. And all you have to do is read the source, and you figure out Anderson didn't know what he was talking about. He confused two different calendars. And that's what I try to do. I just try to separate truth from myth. Sometimes that separation helps support Christianity for me. Sometimes it leaves me like this going, yeah, I'm not sure. I just don't know. Not positive. On the Christmas thing, I went, yeah, it's possible, but I can't verify it. Right? You got to be willing to do this. If truth matters to you, sometimes the answer is going to be, I don't know. I dug as deep as I can, and I can't tell you for sure one way or another. And that's where I'm at. I care about truth. And God's not afraid of truth. God's the source of truth. In my opinion, if you ask questions, it's either going to lead you to God or a question only God can answer. And either way, I'm fine. God is not intimidated by your questions. He's not intimidated by your doubt. You can ask these questions. You can go down these rabbit trails. But don't trust the people telling you. Hopefully, I've developed some trust, but I still encourage you to download the PDF and go look up these sources yourself. Because I told you the ones I can find and the ones I can't. Right? And with that, if you're new here, at this point I put on a song. I go through the different chats, see if there's any questions or comments I need to address. I'll come back and do what I used to do as an introduction, and then we'll get out of here before too long. And I just want to thank you all for joining me, for tuning in, for putting up with my nonsense of being willing to go on a Freaky Friday and run down a crazy rabbit trail. And when I started my stream, Michael Beatty, my good friend, Miguel California, offered to write me a song. And I told him, no, your song, Walk Through the Fire, speaks to my soul. Some people think knees speaks to them. They really love it. I love knees too, but Walk Through the Fire spoke to me, and I used the music from Walk Through the Fire as my introduction. But here's the actual song, and I'm going to put it on, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay. Oh, I didn't shut off my mic, so you got to hear my squeaky chair as I was rolling around. Sorry about that. Neil, I see you referring back to an earlier question about by ambassador. I mean, like a missionary, but I didn't see the earlier question. So, yeah, we are ambassadors of Christ. We are kind of missionaries. We're his representatives here. If that's what you're asking, I'm not sure. And then Amy Jo, I hunt in southwest Idaho in Hell's Canyon, so not really much of northern Idaho. I have a bunch of friends that moved up there around Coeur d'Alene, not really super north, but way further north than I am, or I go. But Yeah, I'm sure you can hear stories about Bigfoot, about dog-headed men, about all kinds of stuff. And there are people we have encountered that give off very much animal spirits in their stuff, and I think they're possessed in reality, and have encountered some of them in churches, just as Jesus encountered the demoniac in church, right? I mean, demon-filled person that was there in the synagogue, and you know, so it's very possible for them to go to church and to be sitting right among you, you know, and but this is just one of those weird things, and I'm kind of so was Saint Christopher depicted like that because he could have been a missionary to the dog tribes rather than one himself. Hey, and anything is possible as an ambassador to them. You don't know. It really looks like it was just, like I said, the simplest answer is it's a mistranslation, and but that doesn't explain all these other references to Dogmen. This has really been fascinating to me because it's one of those things where you just don't know at the end of it. A lot of this stuff, if you take time to investigate it, it's easy to dismiss. And I don't mean investigating by looking at how many YouTubers have said the same thing. I'm talking about actually looking for sources. You know, I'm a little bit hindered here on Kauai because I don't have the same library sources I had in California. But I still do the work to research this stuff. And you could do the same thing. And if you really want to be credible and and care about credibility and what you all say or what you're willing to repeat, we got to do that. We gotta start checking out sources and calling people out that are making crap up out of whole cloth, especially when they claim to be Christian. So at this point, I'm going to go through my introduction. And like I said, these are normally slides I used to show in the beginning, but I broadcast Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I am Donahue Papa on most platforms. I am Bill Donahue on Pilled or Foxhole. And then when I finally went to YouTube, the only thing I could get was Discerning Truth 534. But I'm known as Donahue Papa almost everywhere. Even I started writing a few things on Substract, things that don't require a whole hour to deal with. And Substract, I am Donahue Papa over there as well. On Tuesdays, I join Neil. I've always loved my conversations with Neil. In the last couple of weeks, they've really been extraordinary, in my opinion. And then yesterday, I did a almost 3-hour call with Amy Jo for Truth, and she sent me a message before I went online that she's hoping to have a piece of that put together by tomorrow, so it won't be a 3-hour broadcast. Be there, but I broadcast at noon Pacific time. Even though I'm in Hawaii, I started in California. I've kept Pacific time, and then Neo's on it 10:20, 10:25ish, 10:30, whatever. She usually puts 10:15 somewhere in there, Central Time, and she broadcasts 5 days a week, and I join her on Tuesday. If I missed your question, or you're on a platform like CloutHub where chat is virtually non-existent, just email me your question. It might be the reason I do another deep dive like this. Okay, your question may lead to that. If not, and I can answer it on the next stream, I will come back on that stream and give you your answer. I started on CloutHub when Jeff Brain was alive. I had all my eggs in that basket, so to speak, that and D-Live. And then CloutHub hasn't gone where I was hoping it's going to be, so I had to spread out. I went on to Rumble, and then ultimately went on to Discerning Truth. And I had uploaded everything on YouTube, and I've discovered their playlists, so I was able to organize my videos into playlists. So there's a playlist called Freaky Fridays, and this video will be in it. It's for any subjects that don't fit in other playlists. Rumble doesn't have playlists, but they want you to broadcast on a channel, not in your native account. But you can make multiple channels. So I made like 11 channels. So I don't have as many playlists as you have in YouTube, but there's a bunch of channels. The only negative, well, one of the negatives with Rumble, there's plenty of them, but one of them is that if you like one channel, like Freaky Fridays, and you want to see the other stuff, you got to go back out to the main page, find the other channels, and go in and like them all. Once you do or subscribe, then you're good to go. If you're a streamer, on Christmas Eve, Rumble laid out a new upgrade, supposedly, to where you don't need a custom stream key and to set up your Rumble broadcast in advance and to do all that. So it comes in like on Restream, like any other channel. It is a disaster. Do not use the upgrade. I'm still using the old one, so you'll get the thing from me. I usually catch my typos, at least most of them, while I'm streaming. So I create a PDF after the stream, and I post it on Discerning Truth Groups as a PDF. You can download it, look up all the sources, have my references, whatever you find there. And then I always promote my good friend Michael Beatty, Miguel, California. He's all the music I play here. I met Michael when he was a worship leader. We've been friends for 25 years or so. He now teaches the Bible 6 days a week. And right now, he just finished the Gospel of Mark. So he's doing the Book of Ruth. Very cool study in the morning. His worship and praise thing at 5:30 a.m. Pacific time. His worship music with a lot of hellos. He's got a much bigger chat. And then he'll do a proverb of the day, whatever the day of the month it is, because there's 31 proverbs, so you get it. And then he does a short Bible study. Cool way to start your day. Sunday, his wife Linda joins him, and they are going through Psalms. I highly recommend Michael as a good place to go and listen. If you just want to get that little sacred space in the morning, right? So, and yeah, Mystery 20, replays are forever, right? You know, I get far more views on replay than I do live. It's just a natural, whatever we're doing. And so I do thank you all for coming. And then on God willing, Monday I will be back here and talking about Ezekiel. If not, I'll probably see you in Amy Joe's chat tomorrow morning, and we'll see what's happening over there. But thank you all for listening to my Freaky Friday show, and then I'll be out of here.